My name is Alessandra and I'm Innovation Learning Manager. And today I'm just technical support for this session. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, I'm technical support for this session today. And just a couple of house rules for anyone who just joined. So if you are not speaking live, please, we can put on mute. And if you have any questions, if you can type them in the chat, and then we'll just pick them up later after the presentation. If there is any concern in terms of connection, technical Zoom problems, you can just chat with me directly in the chat. And just to let you know, importantly, that this session has language support, both for French and Spanish. So you can select your language channel at the bottom right. And then everyone else, if you can, just select English, please. And then you'll be able to hear the correct language. And also to let you know that the session is recorded, I will be made available publicly. So if you don't wish to be recorded, you can turn your video off and also communicate just with the chat. Thank you. Over to you, Neil.
Great. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining this session. And primarily, we're very much looking forward to hearing from the Guatemala Hub and the DRC Hub about the programs and designs they've been working on. I'm just going to do a super quick introduction to START and innovation and why innovation before we get started, and then we'll be handing over the mic. So just a little bit about innovation. So a couple of reasons why we think innovation is quite important. Is that it? You okay, Letitia? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Great. So a couple of reasons why we think innovation is quite important to what we do. One is that with our goal as a network of moving to a humanitarian system, which is much more substantially driven by local actors, by a locally driven humanitarian system, really means doing quite a lot of things different, and it means quite a lot of change for a lot of actors. And that system change or systems innovation is primarily what drives us. And we think as a network, it's really important that we become more and more skilled in using innovation tools, innovation approaches to be able to support that system change as it happens over the next few years. And that's one of the things we want to become really good at and really good at supporting our members in, is enabling members and organizations and hubs to be able to deploy those innovation skills to support the system change that is going to be necessary. And then we also really believe strongly that sort of innovation tools like human-centered design, for example, can be really, really useful, particularly as we look to design humanitarian interventions and look to understand humanitarian problems much more through the lens of people who are affected by crisis. We think that some of those tools and approaches can be really useful in helping to move to a situation where the humanitarian system is really driven by local solutions that respond to local demand and that are contextually appropriate and that respond to those people and really reflect their dignity in the humanitarian situations. So those are just some of the reasons why. Well, I just realized you're looking at the wrong slide, so I'm just going to skip through that slide. Those are just some of the reasons why we think innovation is important. Just to give you a little bit of the history, we worked for a few years with a number of different organizations on a program called the DEP Labs. So those programs were in Bangladesh, in Kenya, in Philippines, and in Jordan, working with organizations like IRC, with Plan International, with Adesso, and with the Dakar Community Hospital Trust. And through that process, which was very much a community-driven innovation program, we started to learn a little bit about the process of community-driven innovation. And it's great to see some of the people from that program on the call today as well. It was a very exciting and interesting program from which we learned quite a lot. There were a number of kind of reports that came out of that, and you can find them actually in our Learn Corner, which some guides and some of the information we started to learn from that process. And you can also find in our Learn Corner the program evaluation, which has some of the results that came out of that program, which is, it's an interesting read. It highlights things that worked well, a really good case around the effectiveness of locally driven innovation. It also highlights things that we could have done better and learn from. And hopefully we're going to take that as we move into the next phase of our program. A few other things we're working on around innovation. We've just done a member challenge to find teams who are working at the cutting edge to do things differently. And we'll be providing them also with a sort of package of mentoring and different support over the coming months. And we'll be talking more about that in a session at, I think it's 1:30 tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, please dial in. That's actually all from me. I'm going to hand over quickly to Lily, who was also involved in that previous program that I mentioned. Lily's just going to say a few words about some of through her experience in that prior program, some of the things that we learned about the process of community-led innovation.
Thank you, Neil. Hi, everyone. Great to see so many people in the session. My name is Lily. I was the coordinator of the Innovation Lab in Jordan during the last community-driven innovation program. And we were working primarily with Syrian activists to design solutions to the problems that urban refugees faced in Jordan. And I just wanted to say a few words on some of kind of the benefits or value of a program like this. And I wanted to skip over some of the really obvious ones, which are, also things that Neil alluded to, which are really intuitive. And you all probably know that, of course, people have a different understanding of their own problems. And of course, that they have different insights into what assets they can leverage to solve those problems and come up with solutions that are really interesting and have multiple values for their community, including things like benefits for the environment, benefits for the economics in a local community, sustainability, being locally embedded. They're emerging from the same cultures and societies that they're for. So there's a lot of really obvious benefits, but I wanted to just mention briefly benefits that might be less obvious and kind of from a more self-interested perspective. As an organization that's doing a community-driven innovation program, what's the value? And so for this program, I was working with the International Rescue Committee, and we had to be very responsive, very fast, very adaptive, completely driven by activists from the community and what they wanted to design, and very collaborative, working across private sector, government, lots of different civil society organizations. And we couldn't do it. We simply couldn't do what we were supposed to do with the systems that we had. We were too slow, too risk averse, too unable to actually implement feedback and respond to it from the innovators that we were working with. So the really kind of fascinating thing that came out of doing a program like this was having to evolve processes and systems, ways of working, culture that allowed us to be adaptive and allowed us to be responsive and totally have our services driven by members of the community that were participating in the project and be very open and transparent and collaborative. And it was an important moment for the organization, realizing that we weren't set up to work that way until we had to work that way, until it was really mandated by the program we were running. So I think that innovation programs, community innovation programs, have multiple values far beyond kind of the individual innovations and solutions that come out of them that are really long lasting. So as an example, the International Rescue Committee now has a standing group of community designers that it uses for all of its programs to develop the services and kind of prototype and test designs because it saw so much value in having that element organizationally. So that's just a short pitch for the obvious reasons that community innovation is really valuable in terms of better understanding of problems, better solutions, more sustainability, but also the less obvious reasons, which is that it forces you to work in a way that is super critical for solving complex problems, but actually one that's quite difficult for humanitarian organizations to do. But I don't want to keep you away from the program designs that you're going to hear about next. You'll be hearing from the Guatemala team and the DRC team about what they're developing in their context to support community innovation and really fascinating program designs. And I believe that Guatemala is up first to share their design with you.
Sorry, we are just having translation sort of. We have to allow translation for a second, so bear with us. Thank you.
And Ugo, please tell me when to move slide, or Sandra.
Sorry, since we have some connection problems from Guatemala, should be able to resolve in a second.
Spanish, ahí. Bueno, nuestro objetivo es crear un modelo comunitario de innovación que valorice soluciones desde las comunidades, especialmente indígenas, y que las mismas se puedan conectar en un trabajo a nivel nacional.
Sorry, everyone, just bear with us while we
Sorry.
get the translation
Yeah.
sorted.
So our goal is to create a model of community innovation that connects Indigenous communities with at the national level.
Nous voulons créer une communauté d'innovation qui s'étend au niveau national et international.
Guatemala está localizado en Centroamérica. Tiene 109 kilómetros cuadrados de extensión. Su población es de 16 millones. Guatemala es un país multicultural y plurilingüe. Hay 22 diferentes grupos culturales y pueblos en la región. Guatemala es un país altamente rural. El 60% vive en área rural. Es un país altamente indígena. El 50% de la población es indígena. Y es un país también eminentemente pobre, porque hay un 60% de la población en pobreza y extrema pobreza.
Guatemala is a Central American country, 109 square kilometers. There's 16 million people with many different cultures and different languages, 22 at least languages and cultures. 60% of the country is rural. 50% or more are indigenous, and 60% live below the poverty line.
Esta es la ubicación de Guatemala, que está en Centroamérica. Y por el otro lado está el mapa de Guatemala. Y están ubicados las áreas de implementación del programa de innovación. Son 5 regiones. Eso significa de que la implementación la vamos a desarrollar a nivel nacional en todo el país.
This is the map of Guatemala. You can see indicated the 5 regions where we will be implementing our innovation program. So it will be at the national level, implemented across the country.
Esta sería la línea del tiempo en el cual queremos trabajar el total del proyecto. Los primeros 3 meses vamos a contratar al personal, al staff. Vamos a establecer la relación de prácticas culturales, vamos a preparar los materiales, también vamos a establecer relaciones con empresas de servicio y también vamos a tener la reflexión inicial. Esos serían los primeros 3 meses. Luego entraríamos a al primer ciclo, que es de 6 meses. El primer ciclo lo vamos a desarrollar en el centro del país. El principal foco de riesgo es los deslaves. La idea entonces en esta región es promocionar para activar a 15 grupos que puedan presentar sus propuestas de innovación. Estos 15 grupos van a competir sanamente y al final quedarían 5 finalistas. La idea es que de estos 5 finalistas puedan tener un proyecto o un grant de más o menos $10,000. Por eso el total serían de $5,000 la inversión en la región centro para el primer ciclo. Luego de este ciclo hay un mes que le llamamos de análisis, de reflexión, que también nos sirve para evaluar el periodo anterior y planificar el siguiente, para comenzar con los siguientes 6 meses. Estos 6 meses la vamos a desarrollar en el norte del país. Ahí hay 2 regiones, uno que se llama Cobán y otro que se llama Petén. Petén es frontera con México y ahí los principales focos de atención van a ser las inundaciones, pero también el problema de migración hacia los Estados Unidos. De la misma manera, como ya hay 2 grupos, vamos a tener a 30 grupos compitiendo para que hayan 10 finalistas y para cada finalista vamos a darles de nuevo $10,000. Esa es la idea. De nuevo el ciclo termina y comenzamos con un mes más de reflexión. La reflexión conlleva, como dije anteriormente, una etapa de evaluación del periodo anterior y planificación del siguiente, para comenzar con el siguiente ciclo de otros 6 meses. Estos otros 6 meses sería en la parte sur y occidente del país, donde los problemas que tenemos son básicamente también deslaves y también inundaciones. De la misma manera tendríamos a 30 grupos con 10 finalistas para darles un grant o un proyecto de $10,000. Terminaríamos con un periodo de crecimiento. Este crecimiento sería para analizar el proyecto total, general, pero también nos serviría para ver qué cuestiones están pendientes. Gracias.
So the way that we've organized the program is, of course, we have our launch period where we're going to be recruiting our staff and really building a team practice and culture of innovation, prepare our materials, get our relationships with diverse service providers ready, and kind of reflect on what we need to jump into our first phase of implementation. We're starting in one location, in one region, Centro, focusing on landslides and severe winds that kind of ruin crops and impact livelihoods. We plan on supporting 15 innovation teams in a healthy competition to get to 5 finalists. And those 5 final solutions will get a grant of up to $10,000 each for the development and implementation of their solution. We then have a full month, which is to evaluate, reflect, learn, and adapt our program design before we go into the next 2 regions to kind of repeat that same cycle. So in the next 2 regions in the north of the country, we'll be focusing on floods and migration, since it's right at the border with Mexico, and there's a lot of humanitarian issues around migration. We'll be supporting 30 innovation teams to define the problems they want to solve, develop their solutions, to get to 10 finalists who, again, will have the opportunity for that grant. We have another month to evaluate, reflect, learn, adapt our program. We'll go into the 3rd cycle in an area that suffers mainly from floods and droughts. Repeat that process there, reflect again so that we can plan for supporting the growth of the teams in this final period where we're really kind of evaluating where the solutions have arrived to and what they need, what questions are still pending for them, what connections we can make for them. And that is the design. Adelante, Hugo. El micrófono está apagado.
Algunos aprendizajes que hemos tenido es que hemos tenido la oportunidad de encontrarnos con una metodología muy, muy interesante. Porque no es un marco lógico como tradicionalmente nosotros a veces formulamos los proyectos. O sea, que no es una formulación tradicional. Invita bastante a la creatividad, a la innovación, y también nos invita a estar pensando permanentemente en lo local, en las comunidades, especialmente sus necesidades. Entonces también nos crea ideas visionarias.
One thing that we've already kind of noted developing this program is that it's really not traditional. You know, it's a new methodology. It's not like working with the log frame as we usually do. It's not your typical format. It really invites creativity when you're designing the program, and it invites you to prioritize community, truly prioritize what is local and be more visionary.
Bueno, entonces eso nos crea partir de ideas innovadoras desde la comunidad, especialmente tratando de que las comunidades tengan acceso a servicios. También nos invita a ir viendo necesidades de las comunidades, pero desde su propia cultura. Nos invita a hacer una combinación entre una innovación basado en la modernidad, pero también basado en prácticas culturales. Es un programa que también nos lleva a actuar sobre la base de necesidades de las diferentes regiones, porque hay diferentes climas, diferentes culturas y también diferentes generaciones, diferentes niveles de organización y también diferentes niveles de riesgo.
So we really want to support kind of community innovation, creativity, particularly around connecting communities to basic services, but to use their culture to solve those problems. So uniting, you know, solutions, modern solutions and cultural practices, and it's really starting from the base of the needs in different regions, because of course they have different cultures, they have different climates, they have different generations, different risks that they're facing.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugo, for that presentation. I'm sure there are many people who would like to ask some questions about that, but please hold your questions for now. We're going to open the mics at the end of the session and have plenty of time for questions. Now we'd like to head over to the hub in the Democratic Republic of Congo and invite the DRC team to present their innovation design, which they have been working on. I think we might have, we're having a few connection problems with the DRC, and so they'll be interacting with Lily as well for this presentation.
Sandra, Hugo.
All right, so I think I'm going to be representing DRC for this. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is their program design that they developed, and they are looking to support 20 community design solutions in different areas of DRC. So they are going to be in Goma, looking primarily at Volcano, but other secondary effects of that hazard there. In Uvira, looking at flood and again, other problems that people prioritize. In Bukavu, focusing on fires and anything else that comes up. And Bunia, looking at displacement and its secondary effects. So they are looking to support 5 solutions from each of those areas, and the target neighborhood where they're going to have communities develop those solutions are the ones that are most impacted by those hazards. So they are also working in cycles. So they'll be launching their program and then starting in Goma and Bukavu to support them to develop ideas of solutions to the hazards that they're facing, and then immediately going into a growth phase after that. So they will support community innovation teams. Those teams will have mentors who work with them to also develop and test their ideas. They're going to be supporting them to build prototypes and really take those out into their neighborhoods and test them. And then immediately after that period, those teams will be taking those solutions into the second most affected neighborhood by that hazard and immediately replicating them and developing them further, all the while being connected to potential partners and other funding opportunities. They get a period to reflect, learn, and adapt of 2 months, and then go into the second and final cycle in Uvira and Bunia. Again, looking to support 10 solutions and then immediately implement them in neighborhoods in that same region to support their growth and their implementation. They're leaving a flexible period as well in their program design in order to be able to react to what they learn as they're implementing. So whatever comes out as the greatest needs for those innovation teams to take their ideas forward, they have a flexible time to respond to that and adapt. Next slide. Of course, the learning is the heart of the program as well. So they want to support storytellers from these different groups. So there's going to be coaches working with the teams. There's the innovators themselves. There's the staff that's going to be learning as they go. And they're going to create this kind of forum, the storytelling community that will be how they document and learn from what is happening over the course of implementation. And during those periods of adaptation and learning, they'll have these learning forums that bring together those storytellers to build a picture of what has worked well, what have been the challenges, what are the barriers to community innovators, and to share that learning and improve the program design as they go based on those forums.
I think that's your final slide.
Sandra, ¿me escucha?
So that is the summary of the design. It's very interactive design, a lot of supporting community brainstorming, simulations, activities that will help people find new opportunities to solve problems.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just going to test and see if we can hear from Gang at all. If you've been able to get the connection going, Gang, if you're able to, is there anything you would like to share or add to what Lily has presented?
Can you hear me a little bit?
Yeah, we can a little bit. Let's have a go, Gang.
Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lily, for taking giving a presentation. Really sorry I'm cognitive problems. Just first to share what you've learned from this journey. For me, I think it's really very important to let people know that it's quite a good adventure, because when we started developing this, we did not know where we were going. But questioning and regular questions, we came up to develop what we have now. And until now, we are not even sure yet that will be what we're going to deliver, because the progress of that is flexible for changes.
So, gang,
Like, yeah,
I think I'm going to
yes.
interrupt you because
Can you hear me?
I'm not making out much, but I'm afraid the line is quite bad, and I think our participants may not be able to hear you. If you please feel free to add stuff in the chat, and hopefully our participants will be able to read, and we will send them a link to your presentation as well. Apologies for that.
Disculpando porque no se escucha absolutamente nada de lo que están diciendo la gente de Congo.
So, thanks very much for those two presentations, Hugo, and to the team in
Muchas
Guatemala.
gracias, Hugo, por la presentación, y el equipo en Guatemala también.
We may have the translation on the wrong channel. And thanks very much to the hub team in the DRC as well. And thank you to Lily for stepping in both as translator and also as presenter for the DRC team. Lily has been helping both teams a lot through the design process, and it's that sort of coaching and mentoring role that I think has been really useful for the process. So we'd like to open the floor to any questions for either of the teams or for any of the core team as well that's been working on the program. So please go ahead. You can, I think, post your questions in the chat, or I think if you raise your hand, we can also open the mic for you to go ahead and ask questions. So I think Mirelle has got a hand raised. Alessandra, are you able to open the mic?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mirelle.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Neil. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Great. The question is for Hugo. Is it okay if I just make the question to him and then I can translate?
That would be fantastic. Thanks, Mirelle.
Right. Hola, don Hugo, ¿cómo está? Muchas gracias por su colaboración y pues por lo que explicó. Me pareció súper interesante, y mi pregunta es más que todo como alrededor de, quería saber qué tipo de actividades ya se han hecho, que usted conozca, que usted pueda decir que son innovadoras, o qué tipo de actividades usted podía poner como ejemplo que ya han pasado, que ya en Guatemala, y pues que han sido efectivas para reducir los riesgos a desastres o para responder a desastres.
Disculpa, yo tengo problemas con el audio, no te escuché bien. ¿Podrías repetir la última pregunta? Perdón.
Sí, ¿me escucha bien ahora o no?
Uy, Dios mío, creo que sí.
No, bueno, no importa, si no se la puede escribir ahí más adelante, si no me escucha bien.
Pero gracias por la pregunta, perdón.
No se preocupe. A ver, le intento.
O si me lo escribes en el chat.
Sí, se la escribo. Se la escribo. I'm sorry, Neil. I think he can't hear, so I'm just gonna text on the chat and then, yeah, make the question.
¿Puedo opinar?
Sí, Sandra, por favor.
De ASEXA, Guatemala. Si Lili nos puede ayudar en la traducción, voy a contestar un poco lo que están preguntando. En el marco del programa de innovación que estamos desarrollando, ahorita estamos en un proceso de diseño. Sin embargo, ASEXA ha tenido experiencia ya, varios años de trabajo en la gestión del riesgo. Mirábamos que coincidimos con la metodología del diseño del programa, es que haya un involucramiento bastante activo de la comunidad. Entonces, ASEXA ha impulsado desde el 2012 una iniciativa de que la gestión del riesgo para la reducción de desastres sea en base a propuestas comunitarias, y ha elaborado una estrategia y ha elaborado diferentes manuales de procesos comunitarios para que las comunidades estén mucho más involucradas. Yo creo de que en el marco de la experiencia de ASECSA es lo que hemos ido haciendo. A nivel nacional de otras experiencias, creo que lo que más hemos estado observando es la formación que se hace a nivel local de la organización comunitaria, ¿verdad? Y la otra situación son los sistemas de alerta temprana, ¿verdad? Que también se han estado promoviendo mucho con participación de diferentes actores. Lili, si nos haces favor.
Gracias.
Gerson, estás con nosotros ahora, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Oh. Gerson?
Creo que Gerson tiene problemas con...
Yeah. Okay. So responding to the question about kind of what things have been done or seen so far in terms of community innovation in humanitarian work, is that ASECSA, which is the organization that Hugo and Sandra belong to, and it's an association of over 48 community health organizations that are truly community owned. So they've been working in risk management for many years, and they have always had a very high involvement of community in everything that they do. And since 2012, for example, they have worked with community proposals for risk reduction. So their work in risk reduction is based on proposals that communities make, and they institutionalize those into policies so that communities are much more involved. In terms of what they've seen at a national level, is that kind of systems of early alert have been, working with communities to promote those systems of early alert is what they've observed nationally in terms of community innovation.
Sí, y ya para terminar, bueno, también comentar de que dentro de las alianzas que nosotros hemos tenido a nivel nacional y ya a nivel regional de países, también hemos tratado de hacer como un trabajo mucho más de alianza, ¿verdad? Con organizaciones locales y organizaciones también nacionales que vayan en el marco de poder como evitando la duplicidad de esfuerzos. Y en ese sentido, pues participamos en la Convergencia Ciudadana para la Gestión del Riesgo, que se llama COSIGER, y a nivel regional en la concertación, ¿verdad? Y somos parte también de la mesa regional, en donde impulsamos procesos que ya mencionaba, de sistemas de alerta temprana ante sequía y también ante lluvias.
¿Será que le puedo preguntar un poquito más acerca de eso? Es que en realidad me interesa mucho y quería saber si puede expandir un poco en qué o sea, cuál es el ejemplo, o sea, cuál sería la innovación, digamos. Por ejemplo, usted habla de la alerta temprana para la lluvia, ¿no? O sea, ¿cuál es el mecanismo, digamos, que utilizaron que, por ejemplo, usted o su grupo ya ha visto que ha sido como innovador, y si puede como hablar un poquito del ejemplo como tal?
Muy bien, gracias.
Just un momentito para que traduzca para lo demás. So within our national alliances and regional alliances, because we really try to work through associations and partnerships to not duplicate forces, so we kind of participate in the civil society organizations to mitigate risk. And a lot of what we've worked on is implementing these processes of early alert for droughts and rains. And then the follow-up question was about expanding about what's the mechanism for early alert that's innovative, that they have seen in their work. So kind of more specific into the example. Lo siento, sí.
Lili. Tal vez puedo mencionar dos ejemplos para nosotros que pueden resultar un poco ya comunes, pero en este caso para las comunidades fueron innovadoras. Uno era el tema de implementar sistemas de alerta temprana intercomunitarias. Entonces, hicimos un esfuerzo, en este caso con Red, para que las comunidades pudieran relacionarse con sistemas de alerta, con equipos de radio y también con mecanismos que las propias comunidades utilizan para avisarse, ¿verdad? Entonces, ese fue un trabajo importante en vista de que en Guatemala los sistemas de alerta temprana son muy pocos y solamente los utilizan, por ejemplo, como alertas para los volcanes, también para lluvias, pero muy escasos. El sistema nacional casi no impulsa, ¿verdad?
So one example, and maybe it's common for others now, but you know, at that time for the communities, it was an innovation, was implementing intercommunal early alert systems, where there's a network of communities that associate with systems of early alert using radio and other communication mechanisms of their choosing to alert each other about these hazards. And in Guatemala, there are very few mechanisms for early alert, some for volcanoes and rains, but really hardly used. So that was an innovation for those communities.
Muchas gracias.
El otro ejemplo que puedo poner rapidito es sobre una metodología que hemos utilizado para el involucramiento de autoridades municipales principalmente. Hicimos un trabajo fuerte de participación comunitaria en elaboración de microproyectos, en donde la comunidad participó en la planificación, en los análisis de riesgo con mapas, ¿verdad? Con mapas en donde evidenciaban sus amenazas y sus riesgos, y esas fueron herramientas que llevaron a las municipalidades para que puedan ser tomadas en cuenta en los planes operativos. Esto para las comunidades es nuevo en vista de que muy poco se hacen análisis de riesgo en cada comunidad. Creo que tenemos nosotros esa experiencia de sus riesgos y los monitorean, ¿verdad? Entonces es bonito llegar a la comunidad en donde le puedan a uno contar con el mapa y con sus microproyectos los planes que tienen para reducir riesgos a desastres.
Another just small example I want to give quickly is a methodology that we use to get municipal authorities involved with communities. So we did a participatory program with micro projects where communities participated in, they did the planning and the risk analysis and mapping to evidence the threats and risks that they face. And that was a tool that they took to the municipalities to integrate into government operational plans. And that was new for communities as well, to analyze their risks and also do the monitoring of them and projects to reduce risks in their communities.
Muchas gracias, Lili. Eso puedo responder.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, folks? I see there's a couple of discussions going on in the chat. Lola, just to respond to your question, yes, the slides are available. So if you can head to our Learn corner, if you can access the Learn corners, you should see a tab on the Learn corner which says Slide Deck. And you can click on there and you should be able to download the slide deck for both DRC and Guatemala. And there's an interesting chat going on between Sarah and Gang around how do we integrate the hub's approach to disaster risk reduction and risk finance and the innovation work. And Gang's sort of painting a picture of how those two things might be integrated through an approach where the community is first supported, and he's using the example of fire, where the community is first supported to develop different building techniques that maybe are more fire safe, but then also combining with the risk finance approach, which could sort of support that and fund insurance against fires, so that you have a holistic approach to addressing those risks working through the community. Any other questions that people would like to bring? Damaris, was your question answered?
Sí, me la contestó en el chat, Hugo. Gracias.
Great. We have a few more minutes if there's any more questions. If not, we will leave the line open until 5 o'clock. Otherwise, if there's no more questions, obviously feel free to head off, but we'll leave the line open. And if anyone wants to ask any more questions now, obviously the floor is open. So, sorry, I missed, there's a question here from Lola. So Lola's saying in the chat, I wonder how the selection process will be managed. Are there concerns about potential conflict arriving? So Lily, I don't know if we can put that question to Ugo or Sandra about the selection process. And I assume you're talking about the selection of the innovation teams.
Tenemos una pregunta de Lola. Me pregunto cómo van a manejar el proceso de selección y si tienen alguna preocupación que puede causar conflictos.
Esa es la pregunta, Lili.
Sí. ¿La escuchaste?
Sí, bueno, nosotros creo que estamos con ese reto, ¿verdad? De que queremos hacer un proceso bastante transparente y con involucramiento de varios actores. Pensamos que vamos a disminuir ese riesgo de intereses de conflictos si involucramos a diferentes actores, tanto en la comunidad como expertos externos que puedan ayudarnos a que los criterios que establezcamos pues sean los mejores en el sentido de que pueda ser una selección bastante objetiva.
So, yes, this is a challenge that we have, and we're hoping that with transparency and by involving many people, we'll be able to mitigate that risk. So, of course, there's community selection, but there's also external experts to make sure that the criteria established is the best that we can establish to make a selection as objective as possible. And then Gong has answered in the chat, no potential for conflict because there will be a community steering committee designated by the community itself. It will be 100% a community initiative.
Thanks, Lily. And then there's another, I think there's a question in the chat there from Andrea.
What will be the non-negotiable criteria? So ¿cuáles serían uno de los criterios no negociables para ustedes?
Tal vez pensar en la participación de la comunidad, que debe ser 100%, que sea la prioridad que resuelva las dificultades que las personas de la comunidad están manifestando en su mayoría.
So of course, community participation has to be 100%, and it has to solve a priority problem for the community.
Lili, ¿me permites?
Claro.
Racismo, discriminación, serían no negociables.
And of course, racism and discrimination are absolutely not permitted in any form. It's non-negotiable as well. ¿Mencionó la criteria que elaboraron para la selección?
Sí, claro.
So some of the criteria that was established in the design is that the solution must satisfy a critical need of the community in an innovative way. It has to be better than what currently exists. It has to be appropriate for the cultural context. It has to create unity and solidarity. So it has to unite different entities in how it solves the problem. And it has to be sustainable, not just economically sustainable, but culturally, socially, and environmentally sustainable solution, as well as using local resources and economies, and contribute to el buen vivir, this concept of a very holistic vision of well living, kind of living in harmony with all that's around you. The solution cannot kind of cause conflicts or disrupt communal life.
Great, thank you very much. And then just from the chat, there's two more questions in the chat. So the first one is a question around whether institutional donors to this work are being engaged at country level or in
Hola.
reflecting on the learning from this.
Mucho gusto. Soy de Guatemala y soy de un pueblo maya. Y ¿qué elementos de los pueblos originarios tomarían en cuenta para esta innovación? Que son prácticas que ya se están haciendo en las comunidades y que de alguna manera también aportan al enriquecimiento de los procesos que se desarrollan actualmente. ¿Qué serían algunas de las prácticas que ustedes adoptarían o tomarían en cuenta de las propias comunidades? Gracias.
Gracias, Andrea. Con mucho gusto. Nosotros estamos abiertos a la coordinación y partir de experiencias amplias. Valoramos mucho el trabajo que desarrollan.
So that was Andrea from Maya Guatemala, which is an impact school in the Mayan community for young women. And she's suggesting that if there's, a possibility for collaboration, if they would build on things that are already happening for community innovation in the communities. Yeah.
Okay. Are we waiting for an answer on that question?
Oh, sorry. The answer was yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. So I just wanted to come back to one question in the group chat there about the learning. This is Howard's questions. So he's saying, I'm wondering how you're building in learning and M&E to help build the evidence base of what works in a way that can build donor confidence, increase donor funding for such approaches, which seems like a really important question. I don't know if anyone wants to grab that, or Alessandra, even if you wanted to dive in and talk a little bit about, very quickly, we've got a couple of minutes left, about the approach to learning.
Yeah, very quickly. And just to say that any other question, I will send an email that where you can just drop any questions and I will be able just to answer offline. But in terms of learning, we'll definitely focus on a country level, like really like looking what sort of solutions they can have sort of potential for growth, and being sort of like looking at what is the potential for replication and sort of like residence for scaling up, absolutely. And the main learning would be really like also about, I think this is a very important question about what could work and building an evidence base of how community-led innovation actually could be a different way of using resources and channeling resources through countries that are affected by problems related to humanitarian crisis. So a lot of the M&E and evidence will be based around the experience of the innovators and single solutions and innovations and what is the experience that are generating and also the experience of the community.
Great, thanks very much, Alessandra. So we just have maybe time for one more question if there's any more questions. Just to follow up on Alessandra's point, I think one of the aims of the program will be, of course, to sort of document these journeys. I think it's the style of programming as we learn as we go is something that really benefits from sharing and helping people to sort of share in that journey and to share in some of the learning that comes out of it. So we'll be very much committed as the different countries go through this program to sharing that. And so hopefully there'll be a lot available on our website. But please also do go and look at the Learn Corner, where there is, as I mentioned, some of the outcomes from the previous community innovation program, and there's definitely some good stuff on there to have a look at as well. Alessandra has just posted the email address in the chat that you can also use if you have any questions. And I think through the Learn Corner, you can also contact different team members as well if you have any other questions. So with that, I will thank everyone very much. Particularly thank you to Ugo and Sandra, to Lily, to the DRC team, to Gang, and to all of the other DRC team who have been working on this program. Big thanks. Thanks everyone for coming and listening today. And please do get in touch with us if you have any more questions. Thanks everyone.